All right, so this is Joe Young. I'm sitting with John Lorana. This is a practice counseling session for LaThermo University. And today we're dealing with couples that have high level of conflict within the relationship. So we'll go ahead and get started. Last week we met. It was the first time meeting with you guys, and from that discussion, you guys came in for counseling to try and resolve conflict within the relationship, primarily around communication. We talked about several things last week, so let's just revisit. Is there anything that you would like to share as far as your thoughts from last week, Lorana?
Just that I want to try to use the tools that we discussed last week
Okay.
and come closer together in our understanding.
All right. John?
Likewise, there was a couple of issues last week
Okay.
where I was having some things going on with the kids,
All right.
the girls, where I felt like I was carrying the weight and she wasn't participating. So that caused a little bit of issue, a communication issue.
Communication issue. Okay. Anything you want to add to that, or just?
Yes, just that what he was feeling, maybe he didn't communicate that to me
Okay.
well enough for me to understand the source of his issue.
Okay. All right. All right. So before we get on that, let me just test where we are today. So on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you guys say you are in relationship to the tension on the communication within the relationship?
Just in the communication?
Yeah.
Probably a 6.
6?
7.5.
7.5? Okay. Relatively close, but not a high number, not a low number.
10 being the worst,
10
right?
being worse.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I noticed that when I asked you that question, you clarified with me. I want to do 2 things on that. First of all, that's probably what I want to talk about later.
Okay.
Your clarification is perfect.
Okay.
All right. So,
Okay.
secondly, it does lead me to think: is there something else that I should ask about? Because when I specifically said, "Is there any tension?" You said communication only. So, is there something else?
No, that's just the way my brain works.
Okay.
I want to be specific about what we're talking about so we can be specific about the outcome.
Excellent. All right. Okay. So, 6, 7.5. That's great. That means we have some really good opportunity to work on because you guys aren't that far apart. Okay. Also means that probably the issues that you're struggling with are probably similar. Okay. But John, I do want to touch on, you mentioned the communication piece last week. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so last week was the end of school, online school,
Okay.
that is, right? So there's a lot of things you need to get cleaned up with the girls to make sure they're on track,
Okay.
meet the deadlines,
All right.
and we both work from home. So it can be pretty chaotic with them going to school online, us working from home. So I felt like I was shouldering a lot of what needed to get done at the end of the year, and I could have used a little bit more help
Okay.
in doing that. So that kind of was a little bit of an issue.
All right. So tell me a little bit about your feelings behind that. Why did you feel that way?
Well, I think this was what we mentioned before. I made an assumption on my part
Okay.
that she knew what I needed, and I didn't communicate, right? So I recognize that as a failure on my part instead of assuming that she understands where I'm coming from or what I need.
And does that happen often? The assumption piece.
It has.
Okay.
It has.
Okay. So we'll talk a little bit around how to alleviate that. All right.
Quit expecting her to read my mind.
Let the therapist talk.
Does that happen often as well?
It does.
All right. So I think we can. I won't charge you for that one. Okay. What are your thoughts on that?
Specifically, my thought is, I think that he believes that, well, when it comes to the online school, he and I have different teaching styles. So I go in depth, and when we go through a lesson, I understand what the background is to that lesson, the approach to the teaching and what the outcome should be. Whereas I think that he just looks at the outcomes and clicks a couple of boxes and thinks that he's done. So I want to be more thorough. So the time that he thinks that he's taking to completely go through a lesson, I consider it insufficient. So if he thinks that he has done all the work, I merely think he's just gone through the motions, but hasn't actually taught anything. So he may think he's done it, but to me, it hasn't been done the way it's supposed to be done.
Beautiful point. You're on point today. You know, I think you can come sit with me. Because one of the things I wanted to talk about is what you just kind of talked about, the thoroughness of what you do with the children in this in correlation to getting them for school, the inspection. And it sounds like, John, your style is totally opposite.
Mm-hmm.
How does that relate to your communication?
That's a good point.
So I would like to say about that, that when I want to discuss or resolve something, I expect more in-depth conversation about
Exactly.
whatever it is. And if I hear anything on his part that seems to be surface, I don't think we actually addressed it fully.
Okay.
So I think it's still unresolved and that we don't have a mutual understanding about it and that we can't move forward.
Okay. So, John, tell me your communication style.
Well, I think she just hit it right. I'm going straight to it,
Okay.
right? I don't,
So,
the detail.
when you say straight to it,
Yeah.
give me more on that.
Well, and she mentioned it. She likes to go a lot more in depth, right?
Okay.
So if I can get there in 5 words, I don't need to use 15,
Okay.
right? So I'm a little bit, like I said, more straight to it. And I recognize that sometimes there needs to be more detail, but again, if I can get there in 5 words, I don't need to use 15, right?
Got it. So, would you say, John, that you listen to answer or you listen to understand?
Both,
Both.
yeah.
Mm.
Both. Probably more to answer than understand.
It's hard to do
Yeah,
both.
yeah. Well, and I say both depends on the situation and the
Okay.
discussion,
All right.
right? There are times I do, and there's times I don't.
Okay. So, in relationship to the conflict in your communication, are you listening to hear or are you listen to fix?
You know, to be honest, most time I'm probably hearing and not listening to understand, and just kind of quick nature, which is an issue of mine, which I recognize.
Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. And in relationship to what she said, her communication, this is going to be a tricky question, but we're trying to get to the bottom of it. What is it about her communication that you have a problem with, John?
I don't know that I necessarily have a problem with it. It's just that sometimes, if I can say, it's just too much detail.
Too much.
Right? It feels that it's a little bit more cleaner to me, easily resolvable than as in depth as she goes sometimes. But I recognize that she's a detailed person like that. Right?
Okay. And John's communication style, what is it?
Can I just say something on that point?
Sure.
That when he thinks that I go into too much detail, what I hear is that my feelings aren't being validated. Okay, so the problem with his communication, it depends on the situation, because if it's in his wheelhouse, we communicate well. So if it's tasks or things that need to be done, that's really usually not where our issues are. It's more in the relationship,
Right.
how we communicate. That approach, how he receives the way I communicate, to be impatient.
Okay. All right. So do you guys set time to have these communications, or is it flying by during the day as things are happening?
The latter.
No,
Okay. All right. So a couple of things I want to ask. When you guys both seem like you're planners to a different level.
Different
You're
ways.
more thorough.
that's true.
You're more of it seems to me, as a focused completion type guy. What are your thoughts about setting time to have these discussions so that you don't have distractions? And I would also recommend that they be at times either not at the end of the day, but also not at the beginning of the day, but the challenge might be that because both being The other piece I want you guys to think about is the word reflective. Okay? So reflective, I call it reflective communication theory. And it's as simple as, from a business standpoint, it could be as simple as what we would call CYA, or test and understand. Right? But reflective meaning that, you know, as you are communicating with one another, okay, block out your perspective and try to understand or see the other person's perspective. And one of the best ways to do that is to simply, before you answer, really reflect on what was just said to you. And what I always try and recommend that you do as you're reflecting is focus on three things. Okay? One, the tone of the individual's voice. All right. Second, keywords. Try to focus on one or two keywords. And then three, your mindset from the standpoint of what may potentially be blocking you from receiving what this person is saying to me. Okay? Now, it may sound like a lot, but the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And so, for example, John, the issue about the schools or what was going on in the activity, if you would communicate to her what your expectations were or something of that perspective, you would receive that by, okay, he seems to be rushed in his speech to me, so that tells me he's very emotional about it, right? I don't know what kind of words John uses, but I'm sure you're familiar with
Yes.
words. So certain words that he uses, you know his point. And then for you, the third piece of that would be, okay, my emotions or whatever may be this, but I need to block that so that I can really truly reflect and see how this communication goes.
So take note of the first two, but be mindful of the third so that you don't have it factor into what you're thinking.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. So practice that between the two of you, and I would even say practice it with yourself as well. So if you think you've got something that you want to say in the past where it's highly conflict or it starts a conflict, go in the mirror, say it the way you would normally say it, and listen to how it's coming out of your mouth. Think about what's coming. Think about the words of choice. Okay. The second piece of the communication process I want you guys to kind of work on next week is wording. Okay. It's really funny because we do have have what we would call our favorite words, okay, that you know will rub the other person the wrong way when you're trying to get your point across, right? So instead of doing that, perhaps you would adapt a word that she would use, and you would adapt a word that John would use, okay? So that's what I call flip-flop. Make sense?
I should have brought something the right way.
That's all right. I'll make sure you get all of this.
Okay.
All right? So, you know, what I have, as I listen to the two of you talk, it's not that you can't talk to each other. It's just how you talk to each other. Okay? And it's not that you intend to talk to each other in the way that you talk to each other. It's just everything that's going on. Sounds like it's high paced, fast moving. And John, the problem solver here, anticipates that you know what he's thinking all the time. Okay. And you being the more therapeutic, analytical, you want to feel that you're being heard and respected and all of those things. Okay. Right? So that means that you may be this far apart, but you're not way over here. Okay. All right. Because what I've not heard that you guys exchange like name call. Okay. So that tells me that it's truly just a style of how you communicate. All right. All right. So those two things I would like you guys to really focus on, and then we'll go from there. So John, let's kind of rehearse.
Okay.
How, knowing what we just said, how would you communicate with her in regards to the issue with the children?
You know, I think that word reflective, I should keep it in front of my mind, right?
Exactly.
And block all that other stuff out.
Block it all.
Because you have those conversations, and yeah, you're talking about this issue,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of other stuff going on. Right.
So think
And
of
that
it this
affects
way.
it. Yeah.
She's not your project.
Oh, that hit. That hit. Thank you for that.
Alright.
Gotcha.
So, now, I'm saying that, and I'm not saying, you know, I have to be careful on how I say things. It's not saying that you're the initiator or you're the source of communication.
Mhm.
But let's be honest here, women are the receivers. They basically take back what we give them and spew it back to us. Okay? Now, that doesn't always work that way.
Right.
Okay? But in most cases, that's why I say she's not your project. Okay? Just your communication style tells me that, well, that potentially may be your mindset.
Mhm.
You know, project communication. All right, get it done, get it done, get it done, get it done, and let's move on. Okay, so the reflective piece is how, why, what. Got it?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Makes sense.
Tell me anything else that you guys would like to discuss.
I think this is a lot to chew on,
Okay.
a lot to work with.
All right. Can I get a commitment from the two of you on one, sitting down, figuring out how to have that quiet time of communication? All right. It could be once a week. I do recommend at least once a week.
Mhm.
Okay. Whether that's a Saturday morning or sometime you do need that. Second piece of it is to give some thoughts to the reflective piece of
Mhm.
communication, specifically what you need to bring to the table and what you need to bring to the table. All right. The last thing I would say is communication is in those moments of conflict, high conflict. One of the best things, it's kind of funny. It's like a fire, right? It's burning. Emotions are high. Everything's on fire. Da da da. Stop, drop, and roll.
That's good.
It is.
Stop,
That's good.
drop, and roll.
Right.
So, what I basically mean is pause.
Yes.
Just
Yeah.
drop, roll away,
Mhm.
and come back
Right.
another day.
Mhm.
All right. Because communication is not about who wins. All right. Because if one person loses, both people lose. So it's really about how to move forward. Okay. All right. Any other questions?
No.
Good.
Great. Well, I appreciate you. Let's say we rehuddle next week, same time that works for you guys.
Of course.
That'll work.
Awesome. So remember, the key thing is reflective communication. Stop, drop, and roll.
Mhm.
All right.
Got it.
And look forward to hearing about that one time you guys sit down together this week and talk things through. All right.
Sounds good.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Appreciate you both coming in today.
So, and then I have questions after.
Absolutely.
Okay.